Hi there, friends. I'm Scott Wakefield, lead pastor at First Christian Church of Greene County, and today I am with
Carey Murphy.
And we are going to have a Coffee
and
Convos. Coffee Convos is the opportunity to get to know Carey and hear about the work of God in the lives of our friends. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
What is the best thing about my preaching? Let's start there.
I love how you add apologetics. No, I'm serious.
No.
One of the things I was looking for when
I was trying to go with the most awkward question possible at the beginning.
Oh, no, this is great. So I actually came to Christ through apologetics. So when I was searching for a church...
Yes, and we'll definitely talk about what is apologetics. Yeah.
When I was searching for a church, I wanted Bible-based.
Yeah, sure.
So when I came here, check.
Yeah.
I wanted, the whole sermon doesn't have to be about the historical, cultural context, but
Sure.
throwing bits and pieces of that and apologetics in is exactly what you did. You stayed true to the word. I'm like, this is it. It's my family.
Well, thank you for indulging me with that first question. But this is not about me. This is about you. That was all set up. So where are you from, Carey? Tell us a little bit of history, introduce yourself, and give us a little bio and all that good stuff.
Okay. Well, I am from Canterbury, Connecticut.
Okay.
Prior to that, I lived in California, which is where I found Jesus, actually.
Cool.
Most of my life, I grew up in Connecticut, though.
Uh-huh.
I moved here because my best friend, I came down to visit Nicole and fell in love with the area. So I stopped looking for houses in Connecticut. And
Once you came to God's country, you thought,
yeah, this is great. So I came down over Christmas vacation and started searching for a house. And
cool.
Found one fairly quickly.
Yeah.
What was the other part of that question?
Oh, just whatever bio info you want to tell us about who you are and all that good stuff.
I'm currently a graduate student. I wasn't always Christian.
Okay.
I did used to be involved in what a lot of people term New Age or witchcraft, Wicca. Some call the occult.
Yeah. So you said you came to Christ in California.
Yes.
Tell us about your BC life, your AD life, how you came to Christ, what your involvement was like in that world.
Okay.
And then we can get to apologetics and graduate school and all that good fun stuff. Yeah. All
right. Well, growing up, I would have probably called myself Christian, but I'd never read the Bible. We didn't go to church.
So culturally,
I would have said Christian.
Okay.
When I was at UConn, I started kind of getting a little more involved, curious about Christ, very curious about the occult. My mom's going to kill me for using that word.
What do you mean by the occult?
Anything that's not Christ-centric.
Okay.
It would be, for me, it was New Age Wicca, tarot cards, runes, gods and
what
goddesses.
Are runes?
It's a Scandinavian way of fortune-telling.
Okay.
So
it's like tarot and fortune-telling.
Divination.
Yeah. Right. By doing things with
stones with markings on it. So you have the Futhark, you would throw it, and based on the symbols that came up would be the reading.
Right. Okay, cool.
I had always had interest in it.
I don't mean cool like it's cool. I just
want
to make sure that people understand
what it is.
What it is, yeah.
So my roommate in college was very heavily involved in a church, and I started going to church with her. Her church was more involved in, you had to go through classes, like how did Christ, how was he hung on the cross?
Right.
And then you had to write a letter, what kind of sins have you committed, and turn it in. And then I had worked at UConn Vondermaiden, which is a auditorium for music and plays, and I saw the Voices of Freedom Gospel Choir. I was managing, and I thought it was beautiful, and it felt good. So I told my roommate, and I wasn't an official member of the church, that I wanted to join choir, and they flipped. We're going to start a choir. Those aren't Christians. You don't need to be involved in that group. And all kinds of negativity. So I went up to the director of the Voices of Freedom and I said, Lisa, I'm currently in this involved in this church. I'm not in the church yet. I'm curious.
Yeah.
They said this,
and
this,
you were
and this about
involved
you.
in New Age occult stuff then?
I was
or
just
bef-
starting to get serious about it. I wasn't
okay.
completely involved.
Okay.
It was because in my family, on my dad's side, my aunts read tarot. They did divination.
Ah.
So it, depending on what side of the family you were
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So the man next to her turns around. He's like, I want to go to lunch with you tomorrow. And we went to lunch, and he was telling me a little more about the church. He's like, if you do decide to get more involved in it, they will ask you to disown your family if they don't join. So that was the end of that, and I joined the gospel choir. And we're in a church one day. And mind you, I'm still, baby curious Christian. I still haven't read the Bible, don't know a lot about it.
Uh-huh.
We're in a church that we've been invited to sing, and one of the choir members says the Lord's name in vain because we were walking too slow up the stairs. So my friend that I had joined with looked at each other, went out the side door, and I never went back, and I immediately started studying the occult.
Huh.
And did that for approximately 20 years.
So, without having to, because I can tell you're not saying some names of the first church you were a part of. So, how would you characterize that first church? Because it was obviously legalistic, and you weren't really in it, but you were curious.
Yeah, because my roommate was heavily involved. She was the leader of the college women's.
Oh, okay, all right. And knowing the kind of church you're talking about,
Yeah.
What you said about you'd have to disown your family, and they would know records of things and demand that you open up your checkbook to them, and
Yes.
a whole slew of things like that.
Yeah, it was about control. It was
Right.
very controlling.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so that control and legalism was a part of that first experience, in a
Yes.
sense, with church community.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was a piece of when you say I walked out the door and that was it.
Yeah.
That was a piece of what went into that decision-making process then.
Well, when I walked, with that church, yeah, and then when
Right.
I walked out, when I was in choir,
Right, in choir.
it had to do with the way people were acting.
Right,
And
right.
I was like, they're all hypocrites.
Right.
I'm
So,
out of here.
So you have this legalism, and then the other side almost practically. It's like
Yeah.
it's like manipulation and control, and we don't really actually live any of this.
Right.
It felt like both of those, legalism and license maybe, or something like that. And so that's when you started getting involved.
I dove right in.
Really?
I dove right in. I
What does
went
that
out and bought tarot
mean?
cards.
Yeah.
Taught myself how to read tarot cards. I found every book I could
Wow.
on witchcraft to see the different types of it, whether I was going to follow the Buckland or Dianic. There's different,
Yeah.
how you have.
We've had this conversation, yeah, and
Yeah.
I was fascinated because you talk about this like there's this and there's this and there's this and there's this, and a whole bunch of people are like, whoa, hearing this kind of stuff for the first time, because it's all on the internet, sure, but there's a lot more about this than people I think are aware.
Yes. Yeah.
So you were in that process of trying to figure out, it's going to sound weird for me to even say, but what kind of witch
Do I want to be?
you wanted to be?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I started out what people would call solitary, eclectic. So I didn't
Okay.
have a particular god or goddess,
Okay.
and I practiced alone.
Yes. Solitary, alone, eclectic. You choose. It's
A little
various
bit of
things.
here, a little
You
bit
put
of
it
here.
together,
Yes.
and it becomes your own kind of
Belief system.
system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you dove head in.
And after graduating college, start my career, I meet a group of people because I wanted to learn from other people.
Okay.
I'm very good at research. I can find out anything. Somebody give me a topic, I'll go find out information for you.
I'm filing that away for the future. Go ahead.
And so I'm like, well, I think I'm where I'm at as solitary. I need to find a group to practice with to learn
Okay.
more.
Is that normal? To
Very
find
normal.
others
Oh, yeah.
that become a coven or whatever you
Yeah,
might say.
no, coven's the right word.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the type of coven necessarily that you see in the movies where they're all in a circle. Well, okay, no, never mind. No, the normal coven would be 13 people. And we were
Oh, really?
4.
13?
Yeah, we were 4, so eclectic coven. So now I'm not
Okay.
eclectic solitary, now I'm studying with a group of people.
Okay.
And our whole thing, we did what would be called white magic. So you have white magic, you have black magic, and then you have shadow.
Okay.
So black magic and shadow, you're manipulating other people when you're doing what you would call a spell.
Okay.
All right. So make him love me.
Hmm.
How do I get money from this person? That type of thing.
Okay.
White magic is more like help me love myself. How do I help somebody else? So it's a very different set of rules and thought.
Yeah.
You know.
Like very.
Yeah.
And I've heard that distinction sort of before and kind of familiar, but the way you said the white part, the white magic part is help me love myself as well as the help others. Those are the same ideas for white magic.
Yeah. We even during Christmas had the Carey Cauldron, so we worked with local New Age businesses
Right.
to get gifts for a group of girls living in a group home.
Is so let's go with those two things you said about white magic. Would the idea of help me love myself and help me do things for others and help others, are those the same ideas? And do they end up helping others as a form of I'm loving myself and helping myself?
The idea is if you don't love yourself, how can you love somebody or help somebody else?
Okay, yeah, you hear that a lot.
Yep.
Okay, all right, sorry, go ahead.
So, you know, we didn't consider ourselves bad people. We did want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And then that group kind of broke. We dissolved the coven. And then one member, Tracy and I, kind of started to practice together and study our own. And we're sitting there one day, and I'm just thinking, I'm like, why do we have to have a candle in each of the directions? So north, south, east, west, and then you'd have a candle for spirit. Like, why can't we have one candle? That's technically every direction. And why do we have to have a god and goddess? Why can't there be one god that can give us everything we need?
So you started questioning all of
I
those
was
kinds of
questioning.
fundamental things.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It was quite a few years before I even considered God.
Meaning
The true God.
Quite a few years
Yeah.
till you started to ask those kinds of questions about the things you were practicing.
Before I started looking at Christianity.
Oh, from there on. You
From
mean.
there on, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and it wasn't until I moved to California
Okay.
that I started questioning it.
So how long would you say you were involved in witchcraft, the occult, etc.?
About 20 years.
Really?
Yeah.
20 years. Okay.
I used to get paid to read tarot for people.
Hmm.
I was good at it.
Hmm.
And it worked, but I didn't understand where that
Came
was
from.
coming from.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
Okay. So 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You get to California.
Mm-hmm. I decide, all right, now it's time to write a book. So some of the ideas and thoughts that the coven I was involved in had was Jesus was a high priest in a coven. He didn't die on the cross.
Okay.
He faked his death, or he took some type of medication. We would have like in-depth, non-scholarly discussions about it.
Right.
The tomb wasn't real. The Bible isn't true. It's just
So you were
yeah.
actually
We did discuss it.
explicitly discussing
Yeah.
discrediting that stuff.
Using our own presuppositions
Right.
and personal opinion without doing any research.
Yeah. And
Oh,
there is
yeah.
research out there, of
there's a
course.
lot.
There's a ton of that kind of stuff. And, you know, in seminary and undergrad, you come across a few of those, the resurrection plot and things like that are pieces of those worlds. It's fascinating to me that y'all actually discussed discrediting it openly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was going on.
Yeah. So the topic of my book was I was going to do a grimoire, like what type of spells we had used, and talk about Jesus in the aspect of being a high priest in the book. I'm like, I better do some research and be able to prove this.
Where did that idea come from? That Jesus was a high priest in a coven? Just something that y'all...
Coven's group of 13, 12 disciples.
Okay. That fits.
Very
Now that you
poor
say it,
roadmap.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Gotcha.
Yep.
So, is that a common thought?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, people grasp at anything if they want to think something's true and not have to research it.
Yeah. Sure.
And it was when I was researching Jesus for this book, I started off with, he didn't die on the cross.
Right.
And then I'm like, well, I better do a little more in depth. All right, medically, it didn't make sense to me. I'm in the medical field.
The medical part. What didn't make sense? That he...
That, well, I wasn't connecting two to two. I should have known better, being in the medical field, that somebody in this position would
Right.
experience, asphyxiation.
Yes.
That you pretty much drown.
Yeah. Drown in your
Very slow
fluids.
pace.
And,
Yeah. And I didn't know about the Roman scourging prior to. And I really never paid attention to the spear. So,
Okay.
Just doing that research, I was like, oh, that's wrong. Okay, so anybody that was hung would have died, especially somebody that had gone through a Roman scourging.
Yeah,
having
for sure.
half their flesh ripped off.
Yes.
And then I'm like, okay, well, what about the tomb? So if nobody was in the tomb,
Right.
he wasn't there, maybe they just never put him there.
And so you start looking at the evidence of the number of witnesses and what actually is involved in
Yeah.
a huge stone that
Yeah.
you can't just roll it
And
away once it's there.
It was that point my conviction started to crumble.
Huh.
I was like, okay. I started doubting everything.
Uh-huh.
My stomach was turning, thinking about it. I'm like, is Christianity true? Like, is this...
And that felt troublesome
It did.
physically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting in my living room one day, and I just close my eyes. I'm like, I'm going to try praying.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, God, if you exist, what am I supposed to do next? And it was like a voice clear as a bell, go to church. Almost like, duh, Carey. So then I started going to different churches, and I...
And like, you're with open eyes going to these churches,
Yeah.
thinking, okay, so I think this might be truer than I've thought.
Ever believed in.
Yes. And if I'm going to really do this, I need to understand who these people are and what they believe and where that comes from. So you're probably researching. You mentioned research earlier.
Yep.
Not by accident. And so you're doing this research yourself with churches. You talked about, you come to this moment where you ask God and he says, go to church. What was that like? And how'd that feel? Because there's a sense, and here's why I'm asking, related to you especially, because like I've never, ever had any time in my entire life where I didn't know the body of Christ, right? And been a part of a church community in that way.
Okay.
And so I think I take for granted a lot of things. But you had a whole lifetime up to that point of not being a part of all that.
Right.
It must have been sort of, I don't know, terrifying? Or was it comforting? Both? What was that like for you?
It was more terrifying to realize I had wasted 20 years of my life studying something that had no basis in proof historically that it was anything other than a myth.
Okay.
It was disappointing because I am a very analytical, research-driven person.
And then
that
you go
I
to
never
church.
bothered to do it.
Oh, okay, right.
That
Okay.
I just listened to other people and took
Right.
that for granted.
Gotcha.
That our beliefs, our presuppositions were in fact true, and it was a slap in the face.
So you felt...
But it was also,
Go ahead, sorry.
not to use a New Age term, enlightening.
Yeah.
That is it possible to, after doing that for so many years, can I go to church? Can I find out more about this? What do I need to do? And then find out the whole purpose of Jesus. And it was interesting too. I found Bayside was the church I decided to go to because I
Right.
liked the worship music in the beginning, and they're Bible based, and they would answer questions. Nobody claimed to be perfect. They're like, okay, well.
So they were
let's go.
open about that process.
Yeah, I had a couple people walk away from me. Well, what's
sure.
your background? Oh, I'm a witch.
They're
Exit
like,
stage right.
do you know where you are? Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then I had other people. Okay, so what brings you here? And
Yeah.
you tell them. So what other questions do you have?
Yeah.
What can I help you with?
So they were open about the process, you asking questions, And it strikes me how that's super important for people coming to faith who are like, is this Jesus real? And that's something that churches haven't always been very good at all. That's cool. Yeah. So, tell us more.
It didn't take long. I like devoured the Bible.
Mm.
I didn't do like a in-depth study. I was like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have to read it.
Yeah.
I have to know more. I need to go to the source,
Yeah.
which should have been common sense 15 years ago. So I read the Bible, and of course, I'm reading how God can't stand divinity, and and then I'm getting those doubts like I can't be saved. It's too late.
Huh.
And because I started with the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear God's view on worshiping other gods and
Right. Yeah.
practicing the witchcraft.
Yeah. He is the only thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I hadn't read the New Testament, hadn't really asked too many questions about it, and then I was talking to somebody, and they're like, okay, well, that the point of Jesus is a new start. So why don't you read the New Testament? Just skip the rest of that, go to the New Testament. I'm like, okay, I'll try. So I was reading the Old and the New,
Yeah.
because I can't start something and not stop. And then the next service, they actually talked about why you should be baptized, what it means, who Jesus is, what it means, how he relates to the Father and the Holy Spirit. And I was like, I need to be baptized. And then I was the next month.
Cool.
So it was a fairly quick transition from deciding, my religion is false, to I need to go to a church, to what does this mean, reading the Bible and being baptized.
Yeah. And so how long-ish was that transition?
Within 3 months.
Really?
Yeah.
And
It
did
was
you
quick.
have a clarity of a sense of these things I've been, you talk about it this way now, of course, but did you have a clear sense of these things I've been practicing are false?
Very clear.
So, here you are. You're a Jesus follower. How do we get to, and it makes sense given what you've already said, but how'd you get to apologetics now? And what piqued your interest there?
I was actually on YouTube. And I was like, all right, I'm done reading. I just want to see videos.
And there's a ton
I
of
want
them.
people talking.
Yes.
And there was different topics on apologetics, and I'm like, why are people apologizing for Christianity? And I look up the word apologetics, defense of the Christian faith, and I'm like, I need to dive into this.
Yes.
And then, so I'm watching videos. I'm like, oh, this is what somebody used on me, or the Lord used to bring me to Him, to allow me to, He embraced me with open arms. It was crazy, amazing.
Yeah.
So I would say my interest began there. And then the topic of getting a master's has always kind of been on the back burner. And with COVID coming in, I'm like, what am I going to do with all this time? Because I travel for work all over the country.
Yeah.
A lot. There's no way I could complete a master's program on the road that often. So COVID came around. I'm like, I need to get my master's. And I have my review with my boss. And I'm like, Greg, I want to get my master's since we're working from home now. And he's like,
And he's
okay,
like,
what are you going to get it
Public health, or
Well, I'm like,
or something that's medical.
I'm like, I don't want to get an MBA. Everybody has an MBA. Not that it's bad, but
But you work in the medical field.
yeah,
and you're
it makes
doing
sense. I had actually
demos of.
medical equipment.
Right.
Yeah, and I had actually started a master's in public health.
Oh yeah.
Right after I graduated UConn. I just thought it was boring, so I'm like, am I going to waste my money on this? I need something that keeps my interest.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know if I should go to sales or if I should get something in marketing. And he stopped me and he goes, Carey, he goes, you have your degree. He goes, that's not what your master's is about. What are you passionate about? That's your master's. And I'm like, well, I'm passionate about Jesus. And it was like that, oh, ding, ding, ding. So I started looking up universities and seeing what types of master's programs they had. And I came up across apologetics at Liberty and applied.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that.
And so you are almost done.
I am on my research course for my thesis.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So 2 classes left.
So Must be nice. Um, I'm like,
Yeah, it's
Never
nice
go-
until you realize the more you learn, the less you know.
yeah, that's yes, it's a wonderful and terrible thing.
Yeah.
So, apologetics is fun. It's fascinating, and what's cool is there are credible, legit, good answers, and you can make a ready defense.
Mm-hmm.
You can make a good apologia, an argument for Christian faith and belief. What have been some of the things that in your master's program, in this process of learning more about Jesus and the Christian faith, and what are some of the most helpful and important thoughts you've had in the last couple of years as you've been reading things, taking tests, writing things, doing research? I know that's a huge, broad question because you could answer
There's
a
so many
billion
answers.
things.
Yeah.
But what are some of the most fun and interesting and helpful things that you've come across in the last few years?
That I thought I was doing this course for me.
Huh.
And in the process of taking classes, you just have that moment where this isn't about me. I went into this program having no clue what I'm going to do with a master's in apologetics.
So yes, okay, which means there's a sense in which the application of it was limited,
Yeah,
if only because you're not sure how you're going to use it.
right.
And so you automatically, by default, of course, have this sense of this is for me, meaning I want to do this, I'm passionate about this, I have this discussion with my boss or coworker, whomever that was, and like, so how has that changed, and what made the switch for you? And
Realizing that I was placed or given this opportunity to help people like me come to Christ.
okay,
Because one of my fears when I talk to people is not being able to defend something or not having the answer at right in that second.
you and I are cut from that same diseased cloth.
Yeah, yeah. And life,
Yeah.
it doesn't always work like that. You,
No,
you
it
need
does
to give
not.
yourself a break and
Yes.
understand that the answer's there. May
Yeah.
not be right in front of you, but
Right.
it's always there to locate. But I wanted to learn as much as I could in case I came across somebody like me with my background
Right,
to help them
yeah.
come to Christ.
So
And,
the for you part is equipping you
yeah,
for gospel-centered outward focus.
I want to be a better disciple.
Yeah. And the even if the process were just about strengthening you in your relationship with God, I mean that's good and that's enough, and there's nothing wrong with that being a goal. But it's not the only goal of the kingdom and the Christian life. So one of the most important things you've said is that it's not just for you. What made that? Like, was there a moment? Was there a concept? Was there a moment in class where you're like,
It was my faith and reasoning class. And the class was kind of focused on it's okay to think and question the Bible, and how do you turn a question into a path for answers, and how do you use it once you have them, and how not to just take somebody's word for it. If you hear something and you question it, you need to do the research and go to your community to find more answers. So it was kind of that moment. I'm like, oh, well, all right. Somebody's got to know the answer. God's going to use me how he's going to use me. So learn as much as I can, knowing that this is a lifelong process.
yes,
What I'm going to do with it exactly, I don't know.
and that's freeing. It's freeing to not have to like have all of the ways that you know that this is going to be used.
I have no clue.
Yeah.
I kind of have it in the back of my mind that I want to write a Bible study series or an apologetics series for teenagers, because I don't think there's a lot of that out there, and I know a lot of teens, they get into that college and then Christianity goes out the door.
Yeah, indeed.
And it's common. If we can strengthen knowledge and the defense of Christ in a younger generation, maybe that won't happen as much. It's going to happen.
Well, and if it doesn't happen for one person, it was helpful.
Then you've done something.
Yeah. Super cool. Faith and reason class.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
And the funny thing is, my professor in my research class is the same professor.
So, what are some other cool things that have been especially helpful for you in this degree program? And some cool things you've learned that are just especially helpful for you?
That's a long list. Well, obviously, the whole point is learning how to defend my faith.
Yeah.
But it's also showing me there's a lot of direction you can go. It's never going to be boring. I find it so interesting and calming.
Okay.
You know, I've changed a lot since I've become a career. I was a patient person before, not necessarily with much empathy. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So my heart has gotten softer, for sure.
Cool. Yeah.
My approach to even studying is I used to beat myself up a lot.
Uh-huh.
If I didn't know the answer to something, I'm worthless.
Oh, I
I
understand.
am nothing.
Totally understand.
It's also shown me that another previous belief I had, being involved in witchcraft, they have a very strong view that Christianity is subjugation for women, that women are demeaned and
Yes.
abused. Your
Okay.
function's pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen, and that is it. You have no rights. And
Right.
so naturally, I'm like, well, what does the Bible say about women? So
Yeah.
I've been studying that, and it's like, no, we're made in God's image.
Yeah.
And you know, submission doesn't mean unequal or less than.
No.
It's
and
a
submission does
natural-
not mean subjugation.
Exactly.
Right.
I see. I always confuse that.
Right. Sure.
It's actually a very natural position to be in when you feel safe.
Yes.
When you have a good leader.
Right.
And
Right.
it's not a bad thing. So that's
Right.
kind of been an aha, because I would definitely be called a feminist by many people. You know, I have
Yeah.
a very independent nature.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Moi?
Cool.
But,
Super cool. It's fascinating. I continue to marvel at how, like, God had been putting together tons of little things that, like, only a God
Could do.
can put together. For you and I to be sitting at this moment talking about that process having gone on in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Who are some people that in this process you've had a relationship with, or have been mentors, or people that you that were for you models of what a relationship with Christ is like, or have been helpful in that? And it can be actual people you relate to, or this person that you studied a lot with, or read their book, or people, relationships, books, models that have been with you in this transition and process.
Ooh, Mike Licona and Gary
Okay.
Habermas
Yes.
have been very
Who are
influential.
they?
They are scholars
Yes, they are.
that studied the resurrection.
Yeah.
And very, very knowledgeable.
I think, I may be overstating this and showing how little I know, but I know that Gary Habermas is like kind of the resurrection guy
Oh, he is.
on the planet,
Yeah.
basically.
Yes.
Yeah. And Lacona is more text and canon, I think, if I'm thinking right, about like the Bible is authoritative and actually
Because.
trustworthy because of these kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And applying historical, like legit historical processes that we apply to everything else to the scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, those are two good ones.
They're really good. I highly recommend. If you have any questions, going for their books.
Yeah.
Right on Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if you want to borrow it,
Yeah.
tap me on the shoulder, let me know.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've got a few.
Yeah.
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 Cool.
Priscilla Shire.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I had difficulty with was praying.
Why is that, you think?
I thought it was going to be this, remember my analytical mind, like, okay, how do I pray? I need the checklist to make sure I
Right.
get everything.
Right. A perfectionist, type A, telling me
Yep,
in very definitive black and white terms.
yep.
Okay.
Show gratitude, give glory to God, and
Yeah.
ask for what you want, but make sure you pray for everybody else. And it was, I write
Yes.
out a card and be
Gotcha.
like, okay, I have to do this, this, and this. And
Yes.
through the process of going to school, it's like, no, it's personal relationship. That's not how you handle personal relationships.
Well, sometimes I do, but no, it's cool.
So I actually, her books, helped me kind of focus on the actual purpose of prayer.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And there's a lot of good authors.
Oh,
That's a tough one.
so many books, so little time.
Yeah.
My favorite sport is reading.
Yeah, I love reading. Clearly. Another music has helped. I've heard the term worship softens the heart so you can hear the message.
Yeah.
And there was one point where I was kind of on YouTube and I was struggling with the whole, is it too late for me? I'm reading the Bible and I'm like, just give me some type of hint on what. I just need like some type of extra, like something small to read every day to keep me focused.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, books, blah, blah, blah. And I come across a YouTube video, and honestly what caught me was Guy's hair. I was like, oh, he has curly hair, let's listen. And it was Luke Smallbone for King and Country, reading from My Utmost for His Highest.
Okay.
I was like, oh, I'm going to get that. So I get the book, and I'm like, okay, what else is it? I
You mean
thought for King...
My Utmost for His Highest, or...
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
What did I say?
No, I just was wondering
okay.
if the King and Country guy, King and...
Oh, yeah, Luke is
They had a...
in the band. I
Devo
thought he
book
was
or
a
something.
I thought he was a YouTuber.
Oh, okay.
And then I went back to, all right, well, what else is he reading? And then I saw all the music, and I'm like, oh, and that was my introduction to Christian music.
Gotcha.
I'd never listened to it before. So,
Right, yeah.
you know, I went from
Yeah.
listening to metal and rap and
Oh, yeah.
folky, Wiccan-y music to very different,
Yes.
feel good and
Very different.
very different music.
Cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
So My Utmost for His Highest is another one of my favorites. Very good
Oh,
devotional. It's,
so good.
yeah.
Yes. I haven't mentioned that much lately to people in the last few years, but I should get that back into my cycle of mentioned books. Good stuff. So, we always like to kind of end with a couple of these kinds of questions. What are you learning now? What's God teaching you now? And then what are you excited or encouraged about?
Right now, I am. It's really nice to be able to go on TikTok and listen to somebody make a comment like, did you know that Adam had a first wife, Lilith? Did he now? Well, what's the Bible say about that? False. And to be able to
Yeah.
research where that actually come from.
Right.
And one of these days, maybe I will start responding to these TikToks with actual evidence of,
Yeah.
you know,
It's amazing how
complimentary
much
or
that stuff's out
contradictory.
there.
There's so
There's so much out there.
It's scary.
Yes.
It is scary
And-
how
and-
easy it is for somebody to use a platform
Tons.
like that.
Yes.
Even to say the truth and put one little lie in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I find that all the time. And it's not just people who are trying to like intentionally discredit
Right.
Christianity or Jesus or something like that. It's also people from within, and you think, that part's not faithful.
Right.
And that part means that most of this other stuff that you've said is also not trustworthy. It's everywhere. And of course,
But isn't that the same way that they use that against Christians? True people that love the Lord and
Yeah.
follow Him, and they do that one little mistake.
yeah, for sure.
And it completely discredits.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't.
No.
You know, we are told that we can gently rebuke,
Mm-hmm.
and we should be doing that.
Yeah.
We're meant to be a community to learn from each other,
Mm-hmm.
to keep each other on guard,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
support each other when needed.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
another good thing apologetics is for. If not, anything, it's teaching you, community is important, and
Yeah.
knowing where to find answers is
Yeah.
important.
So, how about in your relationship with God? What are some things He's teaching you? One thing for me lately that has been, and I'm not suggesting, hey, say this answer. I'm just giving an example of something for me. I am a man of way too many words, and so is my family going to watch this episode? And so I'm trying more and more to not give the answer. And I'm not suggesting this because, like, you said this earlier on, I feel this shame for not having all the answers, or a sense of failure in a whole bunch of those kinds of ways if I don't. I'm learning to talk less, not have to give the answer, ask more questions, and especially use those kinds of strategies, I guess, to... And I was thinking about this as you were talking about, using apologetics for others.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to use those kind of personal strategies ish to help other people discover some of those kinds of things, or what God's teaching them. So like that's something lately that I know that I'm learning. And I would say that's sort of a God showing me as I read the Word. For some reason, when I'm studying, I think of these kinds of things. And so in your relationship with Him, what else are you learning lately?
To listen. That's actually a very good segue, because I am like that too. I used to always, not necessarily listen, but hear a part of it and be like, oh, you need this. I don't know what you need.
That's good.
And I've actually been able to use this in my job as well.
Yeah.
When I travel, I meet with radiology and cardiology departments, and I need to figure out what it is they need for better patient care. Well, if you don't shut your mouth and listen, you're never going to find that out.
And you can't adapt what you can do in the solution for them appropriately enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why would that be different
That's good.
for somebody struggling, or somebody that has questions about Christianity? They might be starting a topic, and your presupposition or assumptions are leading them. Oh, this is what you're saying. No, not really. Just listen a little bit.
I do that all the time. I hear a word and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Exactly.
And
I do the same. Yeah.
It may end up that they meant something a smidge different.
Right.
And the definitions are different.
Yep.
So I'm already going down a path where they're like, that's not what I mean, dummy.
And they're tuning out.
Exactly.
You're like, oh, I've got this great information, and you do, but it's not what they need.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Good stuff. And then what are you excited or encouraged about?
I'm
whatever
excited
way
about finishing this program so I have a life.
There.
I love it, don't get me wrong.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
But it's a lot of work, but I needed to learn a lot in a small amount of time.
Oh, yes. And that's the thing.
And this is school is a great way to do that. I'm very challenge oriented. God obviously knows this. He's like, all right, well, this is how I'm going to get you where you need to be
like
right
a goal,
now.
and you're driven toward it.
I need a goal.
Yeah. Cool. So this goal being done soonish, do you know what the next, and you've already sort of alluded to, you're not exactly sure about all the ways, but you've got ideas, obviously, because you've told us.
Yeah.
What would be a few of those next things that might be the next goal or challenge?
Not being afraid to publicly defend the faith.
Okay.
That fear of being wrong and leading somebody down the wrong path because you make that one mistake is definitely on my mind. But we shouldn't be cowards.
Yeah.
We're not meant to be cowards.
Right.
We will have the tools we need when we need them.
Yeah.
Getting that Bible study written.
Okay.
I do want to eventually have a PhD.
Okay.
That's a few years down the road. I'm still a newer Christian, and
Yeah.
learning a lot in a small amount of time, but
Yeah.
I need to focus on community next. Because I'm so independent, that's a tough one for me to swallow. Another thing God's working on.
You've come to the right place. Good stuff. Thanks for showing up. It's
Thank you for
fascinating.
having me.
Thanks for sharing. Good stuff.